Hello, I'm Gerard Carruthers of the University of Glasgow. A crucial aspect of Robert Burns's life and writing career is his relationship with the church or the Presbyterian Kirk. This is the communion in Ayrshire into which Burns is born, in which he's cradled. As a representative of the Kirk, Burns writes a moving tribute to the simple sincerity of its worship in the Cotter's Saturday Night. This is one of the showpiece texts of Burns's first book, Poems Chiefly in the Scottish Dialect, published in 1786. We also find the poet celebrating the historic tradition of Scottish Presbyterianism when, probably in 1795, he praises the democratic impetuses of the 17th century Covenanters. As we'll see, Burns owed much to the Presbyterian sensibilities of his father, William Burness. Straight-talking, honest engagement in theology and in society and culture, a predisposition to have a say, even a vote, these have been argued to be Burns's Presbyterian inheritance. But there's another aspect to Burns and the Kirk. As he tells us in his letters, he first comes to the attention of the Ayrshire public, including a very displeased local church, with his Kirk satires. These texts, such as Address to the Unco Good, Holy Willie's Prayer and the Holy Fair, have arguably been overread as out-and-out attacks on the church. There's a long-standing tradition of left-leaning atheists, especially, appropriating the Kirk satires as Burns's dissent from an inherently diseased institution, reading them as an assault on religion per se. However, the core of these satires, arguably, is about human hypocrisy, the misuse of religion rather than religion in and of itself. Burns also, from 1785, fell foul of his local presbytery due to his sexual behaviour. Fornication in Burns's day was an ecclesiastical offence, with the church entitled to punish by public censure with fines and even excommunication. In the period 1785 to 86, Burns fathers an illegitimate child with the family servant Betsy Peyton, and he also makes his future wife Jean Armour pregnant. As a result, Burns is made to stand in shame for several successive weeks at church as a fornicator. One of the texts we'll look at is Burns's defiant, creative response, The Fornicator's Court, which parodies and indeed turns upside down the ecclesiastical courts. As well as his dislike of hypocrisy and his bringing down upon himself the displeasure of the Kirk, there is yet another important factor that we must bear in mind when it comes to Burns's controversial relationship within his own communion, and that is Kirk politics. Burns belongs to the moderate party within Ayrshire, or the New Lichts. This implies, among other things, a newer, enlightened theology which places less emphasis upon faith and more on morality or good works. By contrast, what broadly can be thought of as the Popular Party, or the Old Lichts, maintained a purer Calvinist theology, including the doctrine of election. The idea that the all-powerful, all-seeing God had decided at the beginning of time who ultimately was saved and who was damned. This is the central idea mocked by Burns in Holy Willie's Prayer. If the moderates were more enlightened, more liberal, more generous in some ways in their Christian outlook, there is perhaps one surprising element to their worldview. The moderates were against the congregation, the local parish people, electing their ministers of the gospel. And instead, the moderates believed that powerful, important local people, such as landowners, should decide on who would occupy the pulpit. Here is a very interesting instance of Burns, so often depicted as the poet of the people, where he might seem to be against the people. I'm standing in the grounds of Cadair Kirk, the church in which Thomas Muir was an elder. In 1793, Muir was sentenced to 14 years transportation to Botany Bay for sedition. Muir was a Democrat who wanted an extension of the franchise through peaceful transformation, at least to begin with. Today, Muir is celebrated as the father of Scottish democracy. Before his engagement in constitutional politics, though, Muir was engaged in kirk politics, specifically representing the people, the congregation, against more powerful individuals here at Cadair in their attempts to determine who their minister should be. From the 1780s to the early 1790s, Muir was also engaged in the attempts to have the Reverend William McGill of Ayr, a clergyman of moderate theology, tried for heresy. And interestingly, McGill was a great friend of Burns. So there are some interesting areas, some interesting tensions into which we're about to delve. How are we to read Burns's moderatism? How did it help kickstart his career as a writer? Are Burns's kirk satires simply a principled stand against hypocrisy, against fanaticism, or is there party interest, even propaganda at play? How are we to read the morality, including the sexual morality, of the poet in the interplay of kirk politics? What can we say about Burns's theological outlook? These are all questions we'll begin looking at in this week's material.